travelers now.
Yeah, so they are cooperating with the State Department. The State Department has offered its help, as have our colleagues at our embassy that are stationed there. The embassy has not issued any additional security alerts after this event. We encourage U.S. citizens, though, to please maintain awareness of their surroundings, to take the precautions that are all recommended. We put out a security message on July the 30th, so you could certainly take a look at that. And I will always make my plug for this. We encourage all U.S. citizens as they travel overseas to enroll in our STEP program. That enables the State Department and government officials to reach you if we should need to in the case of an emergency.
So then off this subject, I just wanted to ask you briefly, I'm sure other people will have more questions about it, about these 3D printer guns.
Sure.
The president tweeted...
Which, by the way, before we get to that, we have a new person here who's covering the State Department, Courtney from the Wall Street Journal. Is she here today? Hi, Courtney. Hi. I just want to welcome you on board. Courtney McBride. Have you all met Courtney yet? No. Okay. Well, she's here, and you'll be working with Jessica Donati? Yes, right? Okay. Holler if you need anything. All right, Matt, go right ahead.
Okay. That was a... I forgot where I was. Oh, guns, right.
Yes.
The 3D printed guns. So the president tweeted this morning that he is going to look into this. I understand that this is not really the State Department's issue, or won't be soon the State Department's issue anymore. But given the amount of public opposition to this and the amount of concern on Capitol Hill that's been raised, is the Secretary planning to do anything to stop these downloads from becoming available as they would at 12:01?
Sure. Let's back up a little bit and talk about the issue, because I think there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of misunderstanding about this issue. You turn on cable news, and this seems to be the lead story on pretty much every channel, every network out there. I think we need to put some things in perspective. This is obviously a heated situation. A lot of people have interest in this story. A lot of people have been ignoring this fact for quite some time since this story began. At least since the year 2013, these CAD files, these computer-assisted design files, have been available online. They've been legal for U.S. citizens to actually download these CAD designs for quite some time now. They've been able to get these designs and print out these 3D guns in the United States. The reason that the State Department got involved, our only equity in this, is because of our role in controlling foreign access to U.S. defense technology. In simpler words, the State Department wants to prevent the wrong people from acquiring weapons overseas. That is the State Department's equity in this. This has obviously gone through a legal process. The Department of Justice was advising the State Department on this entire legal matter. The Department of Justice suggested that the State Department and the U.S. government settle this case, and so that is what was done. We were informed that we would have lost this case in court, or would have likely lost this case in court based on First Amendment grounds. We took the advice of the Department of Justice, and here we are right now. I think ultimately what this gets down to is a domestic case where it's a domestic gun control issue that needs to be addressed, not just by Congress, but also by law enforcement. And so I imagine there will be many conversations held here at the federal level to have conversations about the next steps that should happen now. Obviously, you know, there are pending lawsuits as a result of this, so we're not going to be able to say a whole lot more on this. Department of Justice certainly has a piece.
Right, okay, but all of that is welcome information to have heard, but my question was, is the Secretary going to do anything, because it is within his power until this authority gets shifted to the Commerce Department, to do something to prevent these downloads from becoming available? And then
Matt, let me say that these have been available for several years now, more than several years now. Pardon me.
Okay,
and so they have been available not just from this one website, but many websites. I'm not defending that at all, but I want folks to know this is not something that has only recently become available, and it is, in fact, whether people like it or not, it is legal for American citizens to download this information. So that's why I go back and say that this is a a domestic gun control issue that certainly needs to be addressed, and that's a conversation that perhaps we should have in this country.
So the uproar, the hullabaloo that it has is unwarranted in this building.
I think it would be wise for news organizations and people having conversations about this to be aware that at least since the year 2013, these have been available. These computer-assisted designs for making these 3D guns have been available online for several years.
Last one for me on this. You said that one of the reasons the State Department got involved with the State Department equity was to make sure that you wanted to prevent the wrong people from acquiring weapons overseas.
Overseas, yes.
So that does not apply. I realize it's not the State Department's remit, but wouldn't the federal government, of which the State Department is an agency, want to prevent the wrong people from acquiring guns domestically
That
as
is not,
well?
I would imagine so, Matt, but you know that that's not in the State Department's lane to comment on those domestic issues, okay? Anything else on this? Okay, let's move on.
A follow-up on Iran.
Hi, Leslie.
Or not a follow-up. Can we start a string on that? The president said yesterday he would be willing, if they are, the Iranians are willing to have talks with no preconditions. A few hours later, Secretary Kate went out on CNBC and basically said there would be conditions. Does this mean that the Secretary disagrees with what the President said?
No, and I'm glad you asked me that question because I'd like to clarify this, and I would encourage everybody to go back and read the transcript. This is another example where on basically every television channel, you look at the television channel, and they're trying to claim that there's a split between the State House and the White Department on this, on the White House, on the White House and the White House on this very issue. Okay, and so I'm going to read from the transcript so you all can hear right here exactly what was said. Question. The president said he would meet with the president of Iran with no preconditions. Are you on board with that? Is there a good idea? Secretary Pompeo. I am indeed. We have said this before. The president wants to meet with folks to solve problems. Both the secretary and the president have addressed this numerous times, that we would be willing to sit down with Iran and have conversations about the future of that country. This is nothing new. The State Department has said this, and the White House has said this.
So the Secretary...
The message today seems to be don't watch television news.
Yeah, there are two key stories where people are misinterpreting things and not reading the fine print. And not reading the fine print. Yes, I know.
But he
It
says
is.
that he is.
Yeah, but he said more than that.
He did say more than that. He did say more than that. But
saying,
what is important is that we would be willing to sit down and have these conversations. Secretary Pompeo addressed this when he was in California about a week and a half ago at his meeting over at the Reagan Library, as well as the president. The president has said this too.
Part of his response, though, he said, if they would treat their own people with respect, reduce their foreign malign behavior, and enter or discussions that would prevent their proliferation, and then he finished it by saying, then we'd be prepared to sit down. So those seemed like conditions, then we'd be prepared to sit down, or is it no conditions? He agrees with the president.
I think the president and the Secretary of State both said that we would be prepared to sit down. Would we like a change in Iranian behavior? Absolutely, and that's why you've heard the Secretary speak so forcefully about the types of changes in Iranian behavior that the United States government and many other countries around the world would like to see. We hope that that behavior will change. Certainly the people of Iran hope that that behavior will change so that they can have a better future themselves.
But he'd be willing to talk first before those changes.
The President said that, and the Secretary have both said that.
Okay, can I just...
Hi, Michelle, go ahead.
Can I just follow up on my question first?
Okay.
Because I'm trying to get through. Is that, so if he agrees that this is the case, has there been any outreach to the Iranians or from the Iranians to try to engage in talks?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I don't have any calls. I don't have any meetings or schedules to announce at this point.
Okay, so it is.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Even though the Secretary has said what he said, obviously there's enough vagueness there because he seems to be saying two things at the same time. I mean, that's why there's been confusion and there continues to be questions. So hopefully you understand. He says, yes, I'd be willing to do that, and then he seems to list preconditions. So from what you said just now, is it accurate to say that the U.S. would be willing to sit down with Iran without preconditions?
The Secretary said this yesterday, as did the president. I'd refer you back to the White House for any additional clarification from the president, but I think both have been clear that we would be willing to sit down for that reason. And part of that is, what does the State Department... What does the State Department do? The State Department does diplomacy. Diplomacy is always our preferred approach. That is what we do here, and that is what the Secretary does here in serving this administration.
So this is without preconditions then, right?
I think I answered that question. The Secretary answered that yesterday.
Okay,
the President answered that last night.
But you won't just say it. I don't know why.
The Secretary answered that yesterday, and the President answered that yesterday as well.
But the Secretary said yes in response to preconditions, but then he went on to list what sounded like
those
very
are all
tough
the things
preconditions
that we are asking the Iranian regime to do. We hope that this country, that regime will lead to a better life, will change its policies so that its people can live a better life. We hope that they will be willing to do things, and it's not just the United States asking. It's not just the United States asking for that. It's many countries around the world asking for that as well.
Why can't you just answer yes or no? Is Pompeo also willing to sit down with Iran without preconditions?
Michelle, I think I answered that question for you. The Secretary said that yesterday.
Okay, so
the President said that yesterday as well.
To say without preconditions then?
The Secretary said that yesterday.
Why can't you say yes?
The Secretary said that yesterday, and the President said that yesterday. I don't know how you're not hearing that, okay?
I just don't understand why
I'll
you
move on.
answered
Lori,
this
go right
way.
ahead.
Yeah, well, I have one question. Are you discouraged by the fact that the Iranians have said, you know, you have to return to they've rejected you?
No, not in the least. Not in the least. They are certainly entitled to do that.
Okay, but my question.
We prefer diplomacy. They prefer to export their malign behavior around the world, as we have seen them do for many, many decades. We prefer a diplomatic approach.
I can understand that. I have two questions. One on Turkey. Turkey has failed to release Pastor Brunson, and you've complained very strongly, and there are other issues involving Turkey, like its plans to purchase the S-400.
Mm-hmm.
Are sanctions a real possibility if these matters are not resolved?
Well, certainly the Vice President addressed that just a few days ago, where he talked about the very real risk of sanctions for the government of Turkey. That is something that the United States government has had numerous conversations with the government of Turkey about. In terms of precise sanctions or forecasting exact sanctions, that I'm not going to be able to do. We would certainly like Pastor Brunson to be sent home now. It's long overdue. It's been a long time coming. He is innocent. We have continued to have concerns about his long-standing detainment in Turkey. A step in the right direction, certainly, that he's under house arrest, but that's certainly not far enough. We'd like him to be brought home.
Okay, and on Syria.
Let's say anything else on Turkey before we get back to Syria. Do you have, go ahead. Anybody else have anything on Turkey?
Yeah, on Turkey.
Okay, hi.
So, Heather, do you share the same optimism from Ambassador at Large for Religious Freedom Brownback said the other day that he's confident and there's a real prospect for Pastor Brunson to come home soon?
I'm not going to, it's a very sensitive matter. We would like Pastor Brunson to be brought home very soon. We're having conversations with the government. As you all know, Secretary Pompeo spoke with his counterpart over the weekend to continue the conversations about Pastor Brunson. I'm not going to say a whole lot because we want, it's obviously a sensitive matter. Okay? Anything else on Turkey?
I do.
Okay.
The court's decision today to keep the pastor under house arrest, does that complicate the situation for you in trying to get him released?
Again, it's an ongoing conversation. Okay?